Hello, I'm Scott Swanson, editor and publisher of the New Era and Lebanon local newspapers. I'd like to welcome you to our forum for the 6 Republican candidates for House of Representatives 17th District seat. The purpose of this forum is to help the candidates connect with you, the voters. It is made possible not only by the New Era and the Lebanon local newspapers, but also with support from the Lebanon and Sweet Home Chambers of Commerce, which we greatly appreciate. Our original plan was to have a public forum where you, the public, could be involved with a lot of opportunity for interaction between the candidates and you, but obviously for reasons that we all understand, this will not be possible this election season. So we've opted to do this as a YouTube event, streamed online. We do appreciate the use of the Saniam travel station where I am right now. This is where the Lebanon City Council and the school board meet. And once in a while, you might hear a train go by. So if you think you hear a railroad, you're right, you do. We like this place because it's set up with cameras and technology already, and so that makes it real easy to do this. However, it's not entirely ideal, obviously. We have a wide angle camera, and so you won't be able to see everybody as clearly as I'd like you to be able to, but you'll be able to hear them clearly, and that's most important. We have with us 5 candidates in the room: Scott Sword, Dylan Richards, Tim Kirsch, Bruce Cuff, Susan Coleman, and our moderator is Bob Burford. And he is the retired police chief of Sweet Home. And so we appreciate him doing this for us today. We've run the candidates' names through the, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention Jamie. Sorry, Jamie.
No worries.
Is coming through remotely. I had been in my notes, but then I started winging it. That was a big mistake. We did run the candidates' names through a computer to make them as random as possible in terms of what order they're going to respond to the questions. So I just want you to know that up front. So without further ado, I'll get out of the way and Bob will take over and he'll introduce the candidates for us in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Before we get started, let me briefly introduce the candidates. I'll do so in alphabetical order. Jamie Kate, who is joining us remotely, is a grass seed farmer from a multi-generational farming family in Lebanon. She is a summa cum laude graduate in agriculture from the Oregon State University. She has been involved in a variety of local community organizations and agricultural associations, including organizing a local historical museum and chairing the Strawberry Festival Board of Directors. She is single. Susan Coleman is a resident of Sweet Home and serves as legislative assistant to current District 17 Representative Sherry Springer. She earned a master's degree in intercultural studies of Alliance Theological Seminary and a bachelor's degree in Christian education from Simpson College. She is a city council member in Sweet Home and has been active in a wide variety of community efforts and organizations, most recently as the chair of the city's Capitol Christmas Tree Celebration. She and her husband, a local pastor, have 4 children and 1 grandchild. Bruce Cuff is a resident of the Saniam Canyon, where he works as a property agent. He is a graduate in political science from Willamette University and has served in the U.S. Army and the Oregon National Guard. He is active in his church and with a number of community relief organizations. He has served as a precinct committee person and on the Marion County Board of Tax Appeals. He and his wife have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. Tim Kirsch is a resident of Saniam Canyon, where he served for 16 years as mayor of Mill City. He is employed as general manager of a hardware store. He is a graduate of Saniam High School and attended Chemeketa Community College. He has served as a school board member and as a local economic development board member. He and his wife have 4 grown children. Dylan Richards is a resident of Sweet Home, where his family operates a logging business. He is a graduate of Sweet Home High School and is scheduled to graduate this spring from Oregon State University. He has worked in the Oregon Secretary of State office for Dennis Richardson, and he was a field coordinator for Newt Bueller's campaign for governor. He is single. And Scott Sword is a resident of Sublimity and is president of Sword Logging. He is a graduate of Vernonia High School and trained in missile electronics and guidance systems while serving in the U.S. Air Force. He is a former mayor of Vernonia and served with the Willamette Education Service District Board of Directors and on various local budget and advisory committees in Silverton. He has also been involved in various logging and firearms advocacy organizations, the Boy Scouts, Boys and Girls Club, and as a youth coach. He and his wife have 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren. So for those of you my name is Bob Burford. I'm retired chief of police from Sweet Home, and I'm also serve as president of the Sweet Home Community Foundation. It is my pleasure to be here. And as Scott said, the questions that we have today will be, they'll be given in order, but the order that you'll be answering with, I will call your name out after I answer the question, and then you will have 1 minute to answer, and Scott will be our timekeeper. So if everyone is ready, I will get started. Okay, this first question, and Susan Coleman, you'll be the first to answer this. In recent decades, the GOP has obviously lost traction in the Capitol and with voters, particularly those in urban districts. Why is this? If you're elected, what will you do to help rebuild the party's influence in Oregon?
The Republican Party, I believe, has failed to invigorate our base voters. Year after year, Republican ballots are left sitting on kitchen counters, and we need to encourage and communicate to our Republican base how important each vote is, and each voice matters. I think that one thing that is beneficial about this race is that will become very evident. Every vote will matter. And I think instead of trying to be everything to everyone, we need to first pursue our base voters. We also need to improve our ability to articulate our ideas to voters in swing districts. We are good at numbers, trends, and reality, but we often have a difficult time communicating how we care about swing voters, that we care about the same issues that they care about. I think we can do that and hold on to our conservative ideals.
All right, and I might add that if any of you would like me to repeat the question before you answer, I'd be more than happy to do that. Scott Sword?
Bob, thank you everybody for putting this on. This has been incredible. It's a good opportunity. The GOP just hasn't promoted a strong leadership message or supported solid grassroots candidates for leadership positions for a long time now. I sense a change coming in that regard with rural Oregonians, and they're starting to mobilize and make their voices heard. Secondly is resources. I took a look at the PACs before I came here. The Democratic Party has 7 times the amount of money in its PAC than the Republican does, so we're just not doing very well at getting our message out.
All right, thank you. Bruce Cupp?
Well, the last 2 legislative cycles, about half of the Democrats running for the House or Senate ran unopposed in the general election in its urban districts. As Republicans, we need to run candidates in every single House and Senate district in Oregon. We need candidates who can articulate the conservative values outlined in the Oregon Republican Party platform. Republicans have answers to homelessness, housing, transportation, and education issues that will resonate with urban voters. Now is a time when urban voters will listen. The current extreme liberal solutions have failed and will continue to fail. It has been said that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. The Democrats' policies have failed. It's time for constitutional conservative Republican policies to be implemented and end this insanity. Electing Kim Thatcher as our next Secretary of State should also help by correcting the gerrymandering of the House and Senate districts in the urban areas when the lines are redrawn in the 2020 census.
Thank you. Jamie?
I think it's important to keep in mind that with things of this nature, they tend to be very cyclical. And that proverbial pendulum swings one way and then swings back again. But it definitely has been evident that we have had an exasperated amount of liberal influence coming to Oregon as we've seen such a massive migration of people moving from California. The Oregon GOP definitely needs to do a better job of reaching our small communities, our rural areas, engaging voters, educating them, and making certain that they understand why our vote matters. We have seen such a great awakening lately of people wanting to get engaged in the political process for the first time. They need direction. We need to harness that new passion and energy to help us win some balance back in our state. I think this is the perfect year to do it. President Trump is up for re-election, and it's time to bring that red wave to Oregon.
Thank you. Dylan.
Okay. Yes, I do think that the GOP in Oregon has a very tough time reaching out to new voters, or just not just new voters, but I think that their main problem is younger voters. As I feel like the GOP in Oregon is a party, has a hard time reaching out to new voters. And even voters that we have now that are in small towns, I feel like we don't do a good enough job saying that we are there, that we're there for them. And I think that we need to focus on going after them and helping to get them to realize that there is a state party that cares about them.
All right, thank you. And finally, Tim.
Thank you. I believe if we look at the numbers, 50% of the voters in Oregon are Democrats, 40% are Republicans, 10% are independents. Fortunately, House District 17 has a 70% conservative voting base. But if you look to the urban districts, they are mostly liberal voters. So we have to look to be able to identify, support, and embrace moderate Republicans that can run a race in the urban districts. We've got to be able to show them our message. The moderates can have the same platform as the rest of the hard conservatives, but we will never get a hard conservative in one of those districts. We're going to have to start out taking baby steps. We need to get the moderates in there so that we can have a stronger presence in the legislature.
All right, thank you all. And the next question, just so Bruce Cuff, you'll be the first to answer. What do you see as the biggest concern or concerns to Oregon's rural residents in the recently concluded legislative session? If you were currently in the legislature, how would you address these concerns?
Well, I think the two biggest concerns for rural residents were what the Democrat-controlled supermajority legislature was going to do to their way of life if cap and trade or the new Second Amendment restrictions were passed. These are examples of the Democrats' misguided desire to save the planet and to promote public safety. I personally believe the models they are using to support their climate change legislation are faulty. I believe cap and trade is their latest scheme to increase taxes and further control the way Oregonians, especially rural Oregonians, live their lives. When it comes to public safety, I believe the safest place to be is where citizens are exercising their Second Amendment right to bear arms. Gun restrictions and gun-free zones only empower criminals, giving them soft targets to assault. If I had been in the last legislative session, I would have walked out. In this current election, conservative Republicans like myself and others who are running hope to win majorities in both House and Senate in this legislative cycle.
Thank you. Susan.
I too see the biggest challenge for rural Oregonians is the complete disregard for their way of life and the working Oregonian families. House and Senate Republicans succeeded in blocking cap and trade by walking out, and I would have done so as well, just to protect their way of life. I think that one thing that I've noticed working in the Capitol is that our voices truly do matter, and people showing up at Timber Unity rallies and such were able to have their voices heard. And if I'm elected, I would expect that you would keep me accountable to make sure that I'm listening to your voice, but also I would expect you guys to come and have your voices heard. I think another big concern is the fact that Republicans are outnumbered at the Capitol. we need to work hard to get other Republicans elected in swing districts.
Thank you. Scott.
Right now, we're all reeling from the results of the schools, businesses, and nearly everything else closing due to the pandemic. These are so many concerns now and many more to come. It's going to take experienced leadership and creative ideas to find that solution. To answer your question, though, about the last session, I would say the supermajority pushing the governor's extreme cap and trade program really scared rural Oregonians, as evident with the huge showing at the Capitol on February 6th with Timber Unity. I will continue to oppose that harmful plan. Add to that, it seems like every session, the legislature is finding new ways to raise taxes and fees on Oregonians. The constantly increasing fuel taxes and vehicle fees are limiting rural residents' ability to use our vehicles to get to work, shop, or to medical facilities. The increases in hunting, fishing, boating, trail, park fees, and keeping many rural residents from enjoying our outdoor attractions. Those increased fees are hurting our rural residents badly.
Thank you. Jamie?
I think the obvious threat to our way of life, which led to the Republican legislators walking out, is cap and trade. But it's far from the only threat to our way of life. We saw devastating gun bills that were killed with a walkout, as well as some proposed bans that would have been detrimental to farming as well as timber management practices. We still have a growing homeless crisis. Our schools are still failing, and our businesses are subject to more and more crippling taxes like the gross receipts tax that are being charged even during this economic crisis. We really need to win a few seats back in our legislature this fall. So the conversations regarding these issues that are going to keep coming up are forced to be different than they have been with a supermajority. I'm going to do everything I can to support other candidates in the general election to ensure success for the Republican Party, but also to continue to educate people around me about the issues that matter most to our way of life and the importance of using their vote to advocate for those things. And if push comes to shove, I would fully be ready to walk out if that is what was best to represent our district and to protect our people.
Thank you. Dylan?
The two biggest issues that I feel like face rural Oregon and our communities is definitely cap and trade and also taxes. I mean, I think cap and trade, I know just like on my family, it would be absolutely terrifying if a bill like cap and trade did become law and went into effect. And I know that I completely supported the Republican walkout this last session over cap and trade. I would have done the same if I were in there. And taxes is the other thing. Oregon pays an astronomical amount in taxes. I think that is definitely hurting rural communities more than any other communities out there. I would say that is the biggest one. Yeah, definitely taxes, and I'm opposed to any new taxes. Raising taxes, I definitely will fight as hard as I can against all of that.
All right, thank you. And finally, Tim.
Well, I'd definitely be out of step if I didn't say cap and trade, obviously, huh? It is definitely the biggest ticket out there for last year. It's the one that made all the headlines. We do also have the other taxes that there have been proposed, and some of them already passed. The CAT tax, first payment on that's coming due, even though they have no idea how they're going to do it. There's the real estate transfer tax. There was House Bill 4005, the safe gun storage law. All these things are affronts on our liberties. They are things that are going to affect the rural Oregonian much more than it'll affect the urban Oregonians. Quite simply, if I was in there, I'd be doing like our Republican representatives did this year, stand strong against these measures. The problem is there's not enough of us in there right now to be able to block them. So strength and unity, keep going forward with that and build on the Republican base.
All right, thank you for that. And Tim, you'll be starting out on the next question also. What would your top priorities be if you are elected to the House of Representatives?
Well, kind of like on my last answer, it would be to stand strong against taxes and regulations. We're getting regulated to death as well as taxed to death. When the economy is good and strong, the Democrats want to pass more taxes. But when it slows down a little bit, those taxes are still in place. So I guess we're going to need to focus on stopping that kind of deal. But our big thing coming up is going to be economic revitalization. We all know that the businesses are suffering right now. I don't see this coming back quickly, even though when we open up Oregon again, people are going to still be suffering. So we're going to have to definitely work to revitalize the economy, as well as just to support and defend our rural conservative values.
All right, thank you. Susan.
My biggest priorities will be to have our most valuable renewable resources managed in a way that balances harvesting, access, recreation, and preservation. That involves our logging industries and our other industries that have to do with agriculture. I also would stop new taxes. That has been very harmful. I will network our local communities with resources which build small businesses, advance the workforce, and help us succeed. That is one of the things that has kept me the most busy in my work in the last few weeks, is being in touch with our local small businesses and connecting them with the resources that are available through the federal government to help them during this time. As your representative, I will also push for our government to stay within its bounds, within its role, and protect parental and Second Amendment rights.
Thank you. Jamie?
Well, I think it's actually impossible right now to have a concrete list of priorities when we're in such uncertain times and we still have no idea what our state's truly going to look like as we emerge from this pandemic and start the long process of recovering our economy. But I do think that this situation has brought to light a lot of areas that need some serious improvement to move forward. I think we need to focus a lot of effort on expanding the access to reliable internet and cell phone coverage to our rural areas of Oregon. This will really help so many of our smaller economies, our smaller communities, be able to attract new businesses, as well as relocate job providers to their communities. This will help strengthen our economy and provide stability for those communities. We also need to improve our transportation grid. This crisis has definitely shown that we need to be able to ensure that we are going to get the products that we are growing and manufacturing to market and keep our economies going. I also think we need to take a hard look at our senior health care. We need to look at how we can improve the facilities, the access, and the controls to keep our seniors as safe as possible.
All right, thank you. Ruth?
Well, I've got three top priorities. Number one is lowering taxes and regulation on small businesses by overturning the executive order on cap and trade, working to repeal the corporate activities tax, and analyzing every regulation which hinders businesses from coming to Oregon. Oregon needs to be a business magnet. In Oregon, we need a vibrant private sector economy for all Oregonians to thrive. Number two is education, which I'll cover in the next question. And number three is overturning Kate Brown's sanctuary state executive order. Kate Brown used an anti-profiling bill and transformed it into Oregon's sanctuary state law. This was unconstitutional and unlawful and makes Oregonians, especially those in our immigrant communities, less safe. We need leaders who, like myself, are willing to stand up for the Constitution and get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. And Scott?
Well, as we're all trying to struggle with the reality of our new normal at the moment, it's going to be very difficult to come up with great plans and policies on the fly. But first, I'd like to protect our rural way of life and try to get our people back to work safely and healthily. That's going to be number one. And my votes in Salem will protect those neighbors, rural neighbors, from laws that make it so much harder to live and work in rural communities and our farms and timberlands. Second, I'd like to provide dignity and care to our seniors. The most important thing we can do for our greatest generation and now older baby boomers like me is to ensure that we can age comfortably, safely, and with the dignity we deserve. And third, I'd like to address climate change and environmental issues responsibly. I believe the answer to sequestering more carbon is growing more trees, and I look forward to making every one of those trees grow.
All right, thank you. And not surprising, Dylan.
So I would definitely say today, or not today, but just right now is definitely a different time than normal. But I would say my first priority right now would be getting the people tested that need to be tested in regards to the coronavirus, because I definitely think that is a big problem right now. I think definitely the elderly, especially, I mean, just we're in Lebanon right now, so why not talk about that? But like in Lebanon, there was a bunch of cases that came up. I think that we should do a bunch more testing when it comes to that. And I think that we should work towards a goal of reopening the economy as fast as we can. The second most biggest top priority for me is definitely stopping any environmental laws. I mean, I firsthand will come out and say that I think that I think we should protect our water sources and everything, but I think that Democratic controlled priorities are way overbound. I think that they're job killing. Democrats in Salem right now couldn't run a stream if they let it go. And also the last one is stopping any new taxes and fees. I would definitely say is the biggest one, because I mean, we're already overtaxed enough. We're up there almost with California right now. I think that is a big one to stop. So that is what I will do if elected.
Thank you. All right, and Jamie, you will be the first on this next question. What do you see as the biggest challenges in the area of education for Oregon, and more specifically for the 17th district? And if elected, how would you address those?
I think funding is a tremendous struggle for our schools, and something that shouldn't get leveraged to take it away, pull at our heartstrings that our schools are underfunded just to pass new taxes. We need to have stable and dedicated funding for our schools, giving the districts the confidence they need that those funds are going to be available so they can develop the programs to keep our students as engaged as possible, especially in things like expanding CTE, something that's proven to increase graduation rates by up to 13%. I also think that unions are something that are very detrimental to the success of our education system and are often overlooked. Unions push for a hard left agenda, but they also stand in strong opposition to options like homeschooling and charter schools and anything less than totally government-controlled education. I believe that our students need more options provided to them, not less. And I will never believe that our students' success comes from a one-size-fits-all approach to education.
Thank you. Dylan.
Oh, sorry, I was not, okay, yeah, okay, sorry. Can you read the question again?
Sure. What do you see as the biggest challenges in the area of education for Oregon, and more specifically for the 17th district? And if elected, how would you address those?
I would say the biggest problem with education in my district is definitely a PERS. I mean, like right now, we don't need more education funding because right now Oregon already has one of the largest education funding per student in all of the nation. But so you could have that, but I think most of the I think it was last May, they had passed the sales receipt tax and everything that went to businesses. And so that struck them down because it was basically a sales tax. And most of that money, it was for education is what the Democrats sold it as. So, you know, pass this bill, you're going to get education reform and better graduation rates, which I mean, some of that has came true, not all of it, most of it has not, but a little bit did. But I would definitely say that most of that money goes to PERS. And I think that you need to reform PERS right now is definitely the biggest one that's hurting education.
All right, thank you. Ruth?
Well, education was my #2 priority. In Oregon, education in Oregon is primarily funded by the state. Because of this, local communities and parents have lost influence in the public school system. Local communities and parents need to be empowered once again over their schools. Here's what I propose. #1 is to take 50% of the general fund and give it to the counties and allow them to fund public education locally. And #2 is to give to every parent a voucher that is worth 70% of what Oregon's current annual per student cost is. Parents can use these vouchers to enroll their student in any school of their choice, public, charter, online, private, etc. And #3 is remove all the enrollment caps that have been placed on public, charter, and online schools, allowing parents the freedom to choose which educational option is best for their children. I believe this will give parents, regardless of their economic status, the choice to select a school which shares their values. This competitive approach will make all Oregon schools better.
Thank you. Scott?
We need to get our students back to school and fund education first. The education budget should be the first legislatively adopted budget of each biennium so school districts can have the funds they need to educate Oregon's children. Our local teachers and administrators have been forced to rethink our education models with home teaching. I hope we can expand on these new ideas and make our education system even better for the future.
Thank you. And Susan?
One challenge that I've heard superintendents mention to me facing District 17 schools is receiving equitable funding for districts facing higher proportions of students suffering from homelessness. So I think reevaluating how schools and districts receive funding would be one of my issues that I would address. I also believe that the CTE programs are very important to rural districts in making sure that those are connected to them and they have an easy path to them. An interesting aspect of this social distancing time where schools have been closed down is shown us at the importance of flexibility in education. Many school districts across the state have been forced to react quickly and be flexible when facing this crisis. As a mother of 4 children, I have utilized multiple styles of education to fulfill my children's academic needs. I will support policies that provide choices for student families and embrace innovation in education policies.
Thank you. And Tim?
Yeah, I've served on our local school district's budget committee for over 20 years, and stable funding is going to be very important. It is important. Every year we go through to make our budgets, and it's typically starts out with erroneous numbers. We don't have a clue as to what the state is going to allocate to the schools. We're just guessing games. So then that's because the state has not prioritized as educational spending as one of its top priorities in the budget. So I agree with my co-candidates here that say that the education needs to be the #1 thing that on the budget for the state. Deregulation. Our schools are required to do so much reporting that it takes away face time from the teachers with the students. Common Core, although is a good thing in some ways, different students learn at different rates. So we can't expect every student that's a great math student to also be a great English student. So Common Core needs to be reevaluated some. And then CTE definitely needs to be supported and teach kids how to have a good job, how to show up for work on time.
All right, thank you. And Dylan, you'll be the first to answer this next question. And I believe this question is a little bit dated, but we're going to go with it anyway. We're in an economic upswing right now. What do you see as the biggest challenges in the area of economic development for Oregon, and more specifically in the district?
I would say probably just regulations in general. I know, like for Sweet Home, it's not just state regulations that get us, it's also regulations from the city of Sweet Home. And I only know it's because I'm getting ready to build a house or whatever. So I know that, and I would definitely say, I mean, just overall, like just on the board in general is very, they hurt people. It's red tape that's in the way. And I would like to see just get rid of all regulations, I would say is the biggest one.
All right. Susan.
Now that we are in an economic downswing, we need to provide support to our small businesses and working families by delaying the implementation of new taxes, which will further damage our economy. What this damage as far as economic shutdown it'll be yet to be seen what exact damage will be done and what the recovery process will be. But a large portion of Oregon's revenue is dependent on the income tax. When the economy is bad, Oregon's revenue to fund programs goes down. This would be an ideal time to cut unnecessary government programs. And yet the supermajority is still planning on implementing new taxes. I would oppose that.
Thank you. Tim.
Yes, we were on an upswing, but definitely that is gone now. That went away with the COVID. Now economic recovery is going to be one of the biggest issues that we are seeing before us that we're going to have to work on hard. It's the big issue. But other issues do include that hamper small businesses infrastructure. We need to do development for our roads and bridges, obviously. Yes, broadband, but there's water and sewer. All infrastructure is important to everyone. Regulations or deregulation is going to be key to being able to get things to move forward. Just as President Trump put in a big 2-for-1 deregulation policy, we need to look at that at the state levels as well, because he was able to save the country billions. We could at least save our states millions.
All right, thank you. And Bruce.
Yeah, prior to the pandemic, we were in an economic upswing, but I kind of view that as because of Trump and his economic policies. And I think Oregon could have been doing a lot better. I don't believe it's the state's job to pick winners and losers by using the tax code through incentives and tax credits. I think the state should be encouraging all private sector businesses by lowering taxes and reducing regulations. The state should also be fighting for more access to our natural resources on federally managed land. In House District 17, approximately 65% of our land area is currently managed by our federal partners, the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. As the Republican representative for House District 17, I think myself and the Marion and Lynn County Commissioners should have a seat at the table when the U.S. Forest Service and the BLM are developing their regional management plans. Our citizens and local businesses need access to these natural resources for our rural communities to survive and thrive.
Thank you. And Jamie?
Well, I'm definitely going to echo the sentiment that upswing is definitely not the word to use to describe our economy at the moment, and that rebuilding after this pandemic and the economic devastation that it has caused is really going to be the biggest obstacle in ensuring our economic health. I think that helping our small businesses recover first is paramount to establishing healthy economies again. They provide so much of the much needed diversity to stabilize our economies, especially in our smaller communities. Reliance on one company or one industry can be devastating to so many of our communities if that industry or that business fails, something we are far too familiar with in House District 17, as so many of our small communities have been reliant on timber and on mills. At the state level, I think we need to focus on giving our communities the flexibility and control they need, especially in terms of land use, to continue to grow their diversity and attract new business opportunities that really fit their community's needs.
Thank you. And Scott?
Up until a few weeks ago, I would have agreed that, but now our economy is in free fall and we may not see the bottom for some time. Quite possibly many businesses are going to shutter forever, and those so important jobs will go with them. Yet our governor still plans to keep the corporate activities tax in place. The ignorance of our current leadership in Salem on small business and the economy that supports them and our families is just mind-boggling. We should be doing everything possible to cut costs for all business across the state first. Any economic development plan right now must be one of survival.
All right, thank you. And Scott, you will be first on this next question. We all know that there are many competing interests for tax dollars in Oregon. Please describe, in brief, your ideas regarding spending areas that should be top priorities for spending in Oregon and where cuts should be made.
Again, we are entering an economic maelstrom here. It's going to take severe cuts to many local and state programs to avoid being swallowed up. Our priorities must be to ensure the residents are protected with food, housing, and public safety. And that's got to be job one. We just got to protect our residents. This is going to be tough to do. Everything else on the table for cuts or curtailment should be considered.
All right, thank you. Susan.
Yes, as a fiscal conservative, I believe the state government should focus on creating equal opportunities for Oregon citizens, and yet we do need to consider the economic climate that we are in right now. We need to have focused spending, investing in improvement in infrastructure like roads, water, sewer treatment, educational opportunities, providing safety services such as police and fire, and reasonable oversight in managing our natural resources with the implications that COVID is bringing. We also need to restrain bureaucratic overreach, limiting the growth of government spending. We need to make some cuts in our regulations, deregulate things, but also in our agencies and our programs.
Thank you. Bruce.
Well, I believe the main priorities for the state of Oregon to be, number one, providing a well-maintained and improving transportation system, allowing people and goods to move efficiently. And number two is providing for public safety, allowing people to exercise their freedom and liberty without fear from criminal elements. And number three is to support our county governments with revenue for education, public safety, and infrastructure improvements. The last 40 years have been about consolidating power to the state at the expense of the counties and ultimately the people. We need to move revenue, resources, and decision-making power back to the county, closer to the people. As Oregons begin to prosper economically, I believe there will be less demand for services from the Department of Human Services and the Oregon Health Authority. These are areas where employment cuts could be made, saving tax dollars.
All right, thank you. Dylan.
Okay, I definitely think that right now is a different time than normal. I know when I first read this whole questionnaire, my answers were different than what they are currently. But I would say right now, I think our tax dollars should go straight back into businesses that are affected by COVID-19. I definitely feel like that is a big issue right now. I think that businesses are struggling, not just businesses like downtown, but also like the logging industry right now is really struggling. So I definitely think that most of it should go back into tax-paying businesses. I think that there should be several cuts. I think one of those should definitely be welfare spending in Oregon. I definitely feel like social services Oregon's one of the biggest welfare states there is. So I definitely think that should be cut, yes. That's about it.
All right, thank you. And Tim?
Well, the top 4 priorities, and not in any particular order that I have, is public safety, schools, infrastructure, and economic recovery. These are all the things that we really need to focus on coming up in this next cycle. Economic recovery is going to be the big one, but still I would like to see school be to the front of the budget and everything else. Abraham Lincoln once said, I believe, that government is to provide for people the things that they cannot provide for themselves individually, and things like the infrastructure, school systems, and economic recovery are those things. Everything else we need to take a good hard look at. There's plenty of opportunities out there to cut in areas. So we will just be on task with the budgets.
All right, thank you. And Jamie.
Well, I think with the tax income model we have in the state of Oregon, we're very reliant on taxing people's personal income that they have earned to have our tax money. So that's really forcing us to be reliant on people having jobs, having businesses that are thriving and able to employ more people, pay decent salaries, and that's not really where we are right now. But that's our model. So we do need to be much more conscientious of how we're spending our money and where our priorities are. We need to make a shift to prioritizing so much of our spending on things that are going to get long-term tax income for the state, which is benefiting our businesses. We need to be doing things that are going to create jobs down the road and help really and truly rebuild our economy. And right now we need to cut any spending that isn't in the top priority list. That for me is things that are core to what government really and truly represents. It's our education, transportation, criminal justice system, and our healthcare.
All right, thank you. Okay, and this next question, we'll start out with Tim. Suppose a constituent contacts you with a logical and sincerely held request for you to vote a certain way on pending legislation, but you have already decided to vote in the opposite. Do you communicate your intended decision to the constituent at that time? And if not, why?
Yes, you absolutely have to be able to have a discussion back and forth. They need to know why you're making your decision, as well as you need to know why they stand the ground that they do, especially if, as you say, it was a logical proposition that they bring to the table. So you want to make sure that you're never too hard set that you cannot listen to the points of view of the people that you represent. Obviously, they have some knowledge or something that brings something to the table. I guess one of my favorite axioms is that you need to stand strong on your principles, but in light of new information, never be afraid to modify your decisions.
All right, thank you. And Bruce?
Yes, I would communicate my decision to the constituent. I believe there are two types of people who hold public office, statesmen and politicians. A statesman develops a set of policies based on his values and principles. Then he articulates those policies when he runs for office. He will win or lose depending on whether the voters in his district are aligned with his views or not. A politician, however, is less principled. He seeks to find out what the majority of voters want to hear and then builds his platform around that. I will not agree with every constituent, no matter how logical or sincerely their belief may be. I think as a statesman, I need to explain the principles behind my decision, and I think people appreciate that. No matter what the politically correct crowd tells you, it's okay in America to have different opinions.
All right, thank you. And Scott?
As a city councilman, a school board member, and a former mayor, I have faced many a constituent and at times dozens who are truly angry and disagree with the ideas I have presented. I will do as I always have, listen to their concerns, ask tough follow-up questions, and explain why I believe the way I do. And if they present me truly sound arguments, I am always willing to change with the information.
All right, thank you. Dylan?
Yes, of course, I would listen to them. I don't really understand anyone that would not. I don't know why anyone would run for an office like this if they were not going to be their honest self and say how they were going to vote. But I agree with Scott on this one. I would definitely listen to what they had to say and get their view of why they are against it, or why they're for, or why they are opposite of me in my view of the bill, or whatever it is that's getting passed. But yeah, I would definitely take their in, because I'm always open. I have an open mind. So yes, I would listen to what they had to say, and you never know, my mind could change.
All right, thank you. Susan?
As a city councilor and a legislative assistant, I listen to people's positions on different pieces of legislation every day. And I believe I would be answering those questions as I do now with where I stand on them. I would ask clarifying questions. If the person is willing to have a conversation, I would voice my opinion on the matter as well. I think that one issue that comes into play regarding this in the legislature is sometimes as a legislator it's hard to have a definitive answer on a bill when it changes throughout the process. I have seen bills change on the House floor right before a vote. So sometimes it might be difficult for a legislator to give a firm stance when a constituent has asked. And I've seen that as well, that's hard to give. But I do believe that as a legislator, I will be sharing my opinions openly with people.
Thank you. And Jamie?
I would definitely want any member of House District 17 to be able to feel free to come to me with their concerns. This job is really and truly about representing the people, and if you don't hear their concerns and their views on issues, it's really hard to do that. I think you need to have the discussions to talk through all the pros and cons, the ramifications of a bill, and really come to the best conclusion of how to look at it from all perspectives and what that leaves for the best decision for the entire district. If those discussions didn't change my opinion of what I felt was in the best interest of our people, then I do think that's something that you need to communicate and be able to defend why you're choosing that vote. I think that's being honest with your constituents and helping to build that trust. Transparency is vital, especially in politics where politicians are generally seen as people that lie and aren't to be trusted. So really developing trust from the get-go is important. And I believe in being honest and real with people, even if it means not always telling them what they want to hear.
All right, thank you. And our final question, and Bruce, you will answer this first.
Okay.
This year's Republican primary field is loaded beyond any in recent memory, so voters are going to have plenty of things to think about. What sets you apart from the other candidates, and why should we vote for you?
Well, I believe my core values and priorities align more closely with the voters in this district. I'm a Christian, constitutional, conservative Republican. My Christian values are why I am pro-life, pro-family, pro-parents' rights, and am opposed to the climate change agenda, which is built on fear. My constitutional values are why I'm a pro-Second Amendment supporter, and I'm opposed to Oregon being an unconstitutional sanctuary state. My conservative values are why I'm pro-school choice and pro-business, pushing to get the government out of the way so our trucking, manufacturing, and natural resource businesses, which include logging, farming, ranching, mining, fishing, and tourism, can thrive. My Republican values are why I am pro-Trump and why I believe the time is right for Oregon to get back Oregon from the liberal extremists that are controlling our state. If you share these values, then I'm the candidate you should be supporting in this election. Thank you.
Thank you. And Susan?
When a well-respected, tenured employee steps down from a position, a business seeks to find a replacement. They look for someone who has experience and knowledge that pertains to the position. In my years working as a legislative assistant, I have gained that experience and knowledge that sets me apart. I have built relationships with people in the building. I know the legislative process and what kind of commitment it takes to work hard for our community. My work as a city councilor has given me the opportunity to further understand how state legislation impacts cities and constituents. And I know the fortitude it takes to make difficult decisions and be transparent with your constituents.
All right, thank you. And Dylan?
I will definitely agree. I'm just going to take one side note, but this field is definitely loaded. I mean, we've got more candidates than most congressional races. So it's funny that you mentioned that. But I would definitely say, aside from age that separates me from everyone else, is also background and ideas. I definitely feel like I come from a different background. I mean, my family owns a logging company, which is a big one. I grew up in Sweet Home is another one. I'm also the only candidate that has ever worked for a successful Republican candidate statewide to win office, which was Dennis Richardson. So I definitely think that goes a lot into my background. That's definitely one of the reasons I'm here today. So I would say that is definitely the biggest one that sets me apart, is I'm the only one that's ever gotten anything accomplished statewide for Republicans.
All right, thank you. Jamie?
I believe that my track record of community service speaks volumes to my willingness to work hard and really be of service to those around me. I've led hundreds of volunteers and worked closely with teams comprised of all different backgrounds and walks of life in order to get a job accomplished. I know the value in being a leader, but also in being a team player. And I know how vital both are for being successful in our legislature, especially from a position of the super minority. I'm a big picture thinker, and I'm committed to finding real solutions that work long term for our Oregonians. I don't shy away from the hard work of developing effective policy, and have always prioritized financial responsibility, accountability, and safety in all of the organizations I've served with. I have deep roots in this district and have spent years developing relationships throughout my community. This isn't a retirement project for me. I'm fighting for my own future right alongside everyone else's. So you can trust in my commitment to doing everything possible to make sure our district thrives.
All right, thank you. Scott?
As the most senior of the candidates with a lifetime of community service, as an Air Force veteran, 40 years of experience in the timber industry, and 20 years as a business owner, I have a unique perspective my opponents are lacking. Being recently retired from active involvement in my company allows me to work full-time for the people in House District 17 without any distractions.
All right, thank you. And Tim?
The race is loaded because it's a 70% conservative district, and we all know that the Republican that goes forward from the primary can hold this seat for as long as they want. So we want to look for people that are going to be there for 8, 10 years, because it takes a couple of years for the learning curve to get well situated within the legislature to be able to be very effective. I would say that what sets me apart is I do have probably unequaled years of community service and experience in local government and on nonprofit boards. I've been doing this for the last 30 years in some form or another. I would like to say that I would be willing to stand strong. I'm mad because I've been taxed to death in my business, and I want to be able to take that to the legislature as well.
All right. So now you'll each be given an opportunity for closing statements. And if I am correct, is that to be 2 minutes per each of you? And again, Scott Swanson will be the timekeeper on that. And we'll start with Susan Coleman.
As a mom, a pro-life woman, an active community servant, and one who has district-wide connections, as a descendant of Oregon Trail pioneers, I am deeply committed to Oregon. And more specifically, as a fourth-generation rural Lynn County resident, I am committed to defend and protect our values and way of life. My volunteer work with the Oregon Sportsman's Caucus Foundation has given me the opportunity to continue the fight to keep fishing, hunting, trapping, and shooting sports alive in Oregon. I'm in complete agreement with my ancestor, John Adams, when he said, "A free people ought not only to be armed, but disciplined. I will defend our right to bear arms." I am honored to have been working in the capacity that I have been for all of you. I have met so many people who have taken time out of their days and their lives and their jobs to come and have their voices be heard. I have listened to you, and I will continue to listen to you. I am committed to fighting for our rural communities and our industries, which make us who we are, and keep the ability for us to work, play, and eat off of this great land.
Thank you. Jamie.
I know this is an opportunity to tell you more about myself, but I know it's hard to process everything with such a huge field of candidates. So I'd just like to say that I know that the world of politics can be overwhelming at times, but I think that it's really important that people are going to take the time out of their day to engage in this process, to learn more about the candidates, and to really determine how they want to use their vote to help shape the future of our state. And I applaud everyone for doing that, for taking that time and making that a priority. I hope you feel free to reach out to me if you have any more questions about my candidacy, and also to learn more about my stance on the issues that matter most to you. Thank you again for everyone that is going to watch this and taking that time. And I hope I've earned your vote in this primary.
Thank you. Scott.
11 years ago this month, at the start of the Great Recession, a timber executive came to my job site and told me to clean up the area, take my equipment, and go home. I had to tell a dozen men and as many subcontractors there was no more work available. Like many small businesses at that time, we shuttered for nearly 6 months and slowly started back to work. I spent those 6 months and longer looking for every opportunity to find work for my employees and working with state officials, just so they could survive when their unemployment ran out. Our business came back, and nearly every one of those men came back to work for me. That kind of experience is just what we need. It's just what will be needed to survive this current crisis. Finding ways to get business back on its feet and keeping workers in their homes and healthy. We're in tough times now, and we need experienced individuals to offer ideas to get this through. I have that experience, and I am asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dylan.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for having me here today. This has been a great honor. It's been fantastic. I mean, it's one of our last few times to ever get together due to the coronavirus and everything, so I'm very grateful for all of it. I am asking because I know what it's like to struggle. I have struggled before. I know what it's like when the economy isn't the best. I know what it's like when agricultural prices aren't the best. I know what it's like when timber prices aren't the best. So I'm asking you, as someone that comes from the timber industry and someone that comes from what knows what it's like to struggle, I hope to get your vote. And I definitely think it's time for new leadership in Oregon. I think if you're sick of seeing Republicans lose constantly, then vote for me. If you're okay with how we're going, then vote for my opponents. But right now, I definitely think it's a different time. And I don't think we'll ever see a time like this. Thank you. I hope to have your vote.
Thank you. And Bruce.
Well, in this primary election, I purposely not sought the support of corporate donors or most lobbyist groups. My campaign has primarily been funded by myself, my family, my friends, and voters in House District 17. I want to represent the interests of my constituents in this district rather than the needs of special interest groups. I'm the only candidate to file my voters pamphlet statement by petition. I collected over 275 signatures from voters in the district. My opponents each chose to pay the $750 fee rather than ask you for your signatures. I consider those expenditures to be a waste of campaign resources. I concluded if I could not get 200 signatures in House District 17, I probably should not be running for office. My goal in this race is to meet as many of you in person at your door, ask for your support, and get a Bruce Cuff sign or a Trump Pence sign in your yard. I had also made myself available every evening, Monday to Saturday, at different restaurants throughout the district. I had meetings in Lebanon, Sweet Home, Scio, Staten, Sublimity, Mahama Lions, Mill City, Gates, and even Detroit. I met quite a few like-minded voters until the pandemic shut us down. My goal was to support the local businesses and make myself available to hear your concerns. I hope to start this back up again on May 4th. My goal is to continue to make myself available once elected on a monthly basis to each community in the district to hear your concerns. I think in Oregon, we have had enough of being dictated to and controlled by the extremists in the Democratic Party. That's why the slogan for my campaign is enough, it's time for Bruce Cuff. And our website is www.timeforcuff.org. I would appreciate your support and vote in this Republican primary election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity. Republicans believe that every day is the 4th of July. Democrats believe that every day is April 15th. So we need to keep in mind that we need Republicans in office. And right here you have a field of candidates before you, all willing to serve in that capacity. I think it's up to the voter to be able to look into the past and present and the dealings of each of the candidates to see where their qualifications lie, where their support lies, and how they've been, I want to say, supporting the Republican Party all along. I would appreciate your vote. I've been working at community service for over 30 years. I've been in local government, county government. I've lobbied before the state legislature, and I've even traveled back to Washington, D.C. to lobby there before. So I have plenty of experience, plenty of desire, and I hope I could gain your confidence. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank all of our candidates that have came today, and you've all acquitted yourself very well. You've had well thought out answers, and we certainly appreciate it. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this event. These are difficult times, and you were kind of thrown a curveball with the COVID, but I believe that you've done your best work in getting this information out to the public. I also like to thank the facility hosts here. This has been a great facility, and it works out quite well under the circumstances, and we appreciate all your hard work. But with that, I think we'll close, and I thank, again, the candidates, our hosts, our sponsors, and the public. Thank you.